Hey guys, and welcome to another video. This video is going to be a little bit different. I had some people in my Discord asking uh, how they can analyze themselves, ways that they can figure out what they can do better, right? So I wanted to make a video real quick just to talk about, ways that you can analyze your logs, because if you're serious at all about getting better at the game, then you should be using this resource, which is warcraftlogs.com. Basically, you can take a combat log, and the game will track in a file everything that happens during a fight. Um, you can log during an entire raid, like these guys. This is like their kills on these four bosses, right? You can do it for Mythic Plus dungeons. You can do it for Torghast even. So I mean, if you're really trying to get better at the game, then and you're not logging, then you should be. If you just go to warcraftlogs.com, if you don't know how, you could just go to warcraftlogs.com and you can find out. There's like they want people to use their stuff so they can teach you how to do it. It's super easy. Anyway, so uh, for everyone else who knows what logs are, I'm gonna go over in this video basically how I look at Shadow Priest logs, my own logs, or anytime a Shadow Priest applies to our guild, it wants to join the team or whatever, and our officers are looking for more insight on whether this guy is actually doing stuff right, or if this guy is playing correctly, right? So here's how I do it. So first things first, um, this guy, we're looking at this Shadow Priest right here, Victorial. Victorial asked me to look at this kill specifically, Lady Enerva Darkvein. So Shadow Priest is pretty good on this fight. So you would expect that he'd be in the top, 5, maybe top 6. He's in top 6 right here, so that's good. And then you would assume that if this is his raid team, then he'd be, approximately the same eye level as everybody else, which it seems like he is. So his damage should be, kind of comparable to everybody else, which it is, right? So first off, this guy, I would not say that this guy is significantly underperforming or that he's, significantly overperforming. The other thing I would mention is that that's just a first impressions from looking at just this damage breakdown of the whole fight, of the whole team over the whole fight, right? Um, the other thing I would mention before we get into it is that this is Prague. This is the first time these guys ever killed this boss. And on Prague, the goal is not to parse really high. The goal is to kill the boss, right? So yes, this number 34 is lower than you would like, and this number 45 is lower than you would like. But there's so much else going on during Prague that like maybe you have to sacrifice some damage to make sure a mechanic is done correctly, or maybe you're spending time still learning the movement of the fight, and everybody else is a little more uncomfortable with the fight. So in Prague, generally, your parses are going to be lower, and you can see this across the board with this group right here. Your parses are going to be low, right? And you should never worry about having a super high parse during Prague too much, although you do want to be doing as much damage as possible, surviving as much as possible, that kind of thing, because those will help you kill bosses. So take this parse with a grain of salt is basically what I'm trying to say. Don't be like, oh, I only parsed the 34 on our first kill of Enerva Darkvein, so I suck at the game. Not necessarily true. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, we're going to take a look at what this guy did, right? So first thing I like to do is click on the person. So this is a breakdown of their damage over the fight. And then I click on summary to take us over to look at the character, right? Because before I care too much about the damage and everything, what I really want to see is, are they running the right equipment, the right gear, the right talents, all that stuff. So On Dark Vein, pretty much just a single target fight. There are a couple ads occasionally, but uh, with certain like cheeses, you can immune some of the ads and stuff like that. And the thing that you're most worried about is killing a Nerva as fast as possible, not so much the ads. So you would expect all single target talents, which we have here. So this is good. Hungering Void is correct. Mindbender is correct because they're running Shadow Flame Prism. Auspicious Spirits, yes. Twist of Fate, yes. These two don't matter. And then Fortress of the Mind, yes. Actually, in Prog, I think Body and Soul is probably better than the other two. So if you're doing Prog, then this is probably the correct choice. Although it can be argued like maybe intangibility would be better if you have to like, I don't know, soak something and not die or whatever. It'd make it so that you survive easier, which is a big thing in Prog for sure. And then beyond that, let's see. So they've got the Avoidance enchant on their cape, which for Prog I think is correct. Because again, healing in Prog is super hard, so you want to take as little damage as possible. So this 30 avoidance, while it doesn't seem like much, will make the damage you take lower than if you did not have it. So I think this is a good choice. That's the one I run all the time, actually. It's really good in Mythic Plus as well. And then they've got Celestial Guidance, which I'd say is fine, especially considering not everybody will swap their weapon enchants between every single fight. Like a lot of people will just set it and forget it. The Celestial Guidance is fine on this fight, although I'd probably run Sinful Revelation, but maybe not, because there are a couple ads. Shadow Coil, that's correct. They're gemmed for haste. This is a haste gem, that's a haste gem. They're enchanted for haste, so their stats are looking haste and then mastery, that's pretty good, and a decent amount of intellect actually, so that's good. Then they got low versatility and still a decent amount of crit, which is good. As far as soulbinds and conduits go, they're running Naya, so they're playing poison, so they get the 2 potency conduits, that's fine. Grove Invigoration is good. And then Dissonant Echoes and Haunting Apparitions are the 2 really big things we're looking for here. These are very important. Your best potency conduits for sure. And then after that, Translucent Image. This is super underrated. If you're not playing, well, it's not underrated. Everybody uses it. But if you're not using this, please use it. Because it turns Fade into a button that you actually want to press during a boss fight. For this guy, it's a 6% damage reduction for the first 5 seconds of Fade. So if you know you're about to get hit by something, you can press Fade, and instead of taking 100 damage, you'll take 94 damage, right? You take 6% less damage for the first 5 seconds of Fade. And it's actually huge, right? A 6% DR on, I think, a 30-second cooldown. I think Fade is a 30-second cooldown. That's really big. So if your healers are having a hard time or whatever, you should always be running this. So keep that in mind. So that's good. It's a good sign. This guy's playing Haunting Apparition, Dissonant Echoes, and Translucent Image. Mental Recovery, bad. You don't actually need this because you're not going to be fearing anything, right? On this fight particularly, there's not a different finesse conduit that you can take, really. That would be better. Most people take Clear Mind, I think it's called. It's the one that makes your Mass Dispel cost less mana. So really, this is not like a huge, oh, this is so bad, you should change this. It's just, you're never going to use this on this fight. But you probably won't use any of the other ones anyway, so I would not be taking this, but honestly, not a huge deal. And this is probably helpful in Mythic Plus, so maybe this is just what they run in Mythic Plus, and so they have it socketed or whatever. So, as far as Soulbinds and Conduits go, these are good. Maybe change this. Talents, perfect. And then let's look at the gear real quick. So I went over all the enchants and everything. Eternal Insight's correct. All this stuff is good. You want a 15 Intellect gem. That's for sure. And then, as far as eye level goes, this person is on Mythic, Enerva Dark Vein, and they're playing a 207 hymnal, so that's probably from normal Denathrius. Could be that you just don't have a higher item level version, which I mean that's just unlucky, right? If you have a higher eye level version of this, you should play it. I'm guessing that because you're running this one, you don't, right? But there are better trinkets like the Sinful Gladiator's Insignia of Alacrity. If you had a let's say 213, maybe 216 or 220 version of that, it'd be better than this. Cabalist's Hymnal only is better at like 220 or something. And then the Soul Letting Ruby is godlike, so that's super sweet. I wish I had one. And then these rings. This is the ring I wear. So they've killed Sire Denathrius on heroic because they have the ring from it, but they just haven't gotten the hymnal from it, which is unfortunate. Like I said before. I also use this ring. That's fine. These gloves are fine. These wrists are not the wrists that I would use probably. You can get the haste first wrists from Mists of Tyranna Scythe, which are probably better than these because they've got haste on them. And then these feet are fine, leggings are fine, waist is fine, chest is fine, shoulders are fine, and this neck piece is actually really nice. Oh, it says it's got a prismatic socket on it, but there's no gem. So I guess if this is correct, you need a gem here. But if this is not correct and there is not actually a socket there, then you're fine. But you should not. You should obviously have gems in all your sockets. So good neck piece, and then haste mastery on your legendary. That's good. Okay, so as far as your character setup is, not bad, right? Your stats are pretty good. You're running the right stuff. Everything looks pretty good. Okay, so then the next thing we want to look at is your casts. So I like to click on casts, and then I click on timelines. So this will show you exactly what you pressed and when. This will hopefully, you can look at certain times in the fight and be like, okay, they cast this thing when they shouldn't have or whatever. So, okay, so first thing I noticed, the fight starts, and you don't cast anything for 2 seconds, right? A little more than 2 seconds, so 2.5 seconds basically. So this is wasted time. You could be, you should be casting your Vampiric Touch at 0. It should hit at 0, right? And your Shadow Word Pain should hit exactly when your Vampiric Touch hits. So these should be on top of each other, and they should be all the way to the left. And then the other thing I notice is you cast Arcane Torrent as your very first spell. Not sure what the idea here is. The 15 Insanity probably, but this is not. You don't want to start your rotation like this. So you guys lusted on pull, so you want to start with a Vampiric Touch precast, immediately followed by a Shadow Word Pain, and then Fey Guardian. So at this point, you're doing stuff right. It looks like. But you have about 3.5 seconds before you actually start doing damage. This is time that you could be doing damage that you're not. Get rid of this Arcane Torrent, move all this stuff 3.5 seconds to the left. And it looks good right now. So your opener is Vampiric Touch. Should be followed up. Oh, it's because this is why they're not lined up exactly on top of each other, is because you begin casting Vampiric Touch at 4 seconds. Usually in logs, they'll be lined up. They'll be stacked on top of each other because it ends casting at 0, and that's exactly when you cast Shadow Word Pain. You get a proc of Celestial Guidance. These can be ignored because you don't control that at all. Vampiric Touch, Shadow Word Pain, and then you pop your Power Infusion and your Soul Letting Ruby at the exact same millisecond. So I'm guessing that these are macroed together, which is fine. But I would not macro these together just because there are times where you might want to snipe something with Soul Letting Ruby and you don't want to be casting your Power Infusion at that exact same time. And there are times where you want to cast Power Infusion and not Soul Letting Ruby. So unless you press these at the exact same time, which is possible I guess, I would not have these macroed together, but all in all it's not a huge deal. And then you cast Fey Guardians, which is correct. You cast your potion, which is correct. Mindbender, Shadow or Death, Mind Blast into Void Eruption. So this is all good at this point. Problem is, very next cast is a Devouring Plague, which is incorrect. So as soon as your Void Eruption finishes, if we go back real quick, you'll notice that you're playing Hungering Void, and Hungering Void means that you want to cast as many Void Bolts as possible. So your very first cast, as soon as you get into Void form, should be this Void Bolt. Instead, it's a Devouring Plague. So your rotation, at least your very first cast, and actually as you go into the rotation, it's incorrect as well. So you want to go Void Eruption, Void Bolt immediately, and then Mind Blast, so that you can, because your Mindbender is currently up at this time. It's only been like 5 seconds. So Void Eruption, then Void Bolt, then Mind Blast, and then Devouring Plague. So it should be Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. So so far, at least, your rotation in your big burst window is incorrect, just a little, right? So that you don't lose a ton by doing Void Bolt, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, but you do lose a little bit, and you'd prefer to have it the other way. So Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, right? And then you cast another Shadow or Death, which is good. Then these right here should also be, like I said before, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. But it doesn't matter, you get this Mind Flay, which you have to do. And then you get another Shadow or Death. And then that should be, this is almost at the end of your Void form. And you're back into your regular rotation. So just from looking at the first, almost a minute of the fight, you can say, if we look at your damage spike during this time, go back to the tables, spiked at around 20k DPS. The spike could be a little higher. You just optimized where you're putting those abilities, right? So instead of Devouring Plague, you're putting your Mind Blast and then your Devouring Plague, right? Because then you could extend. You could also, maybe if the peak isn't very much higher, it could be a little bit wider. So your damage, instead of sloping down so hard right here, would be sloping down a little less hard, and then it would be like, a little higher further on, because your Mindbender lasts a little bit longer. Okay, so anyway, that's all fine and dandy or whatever. Then the other thing we want to look at, this fight is 5 minutes and 41 seconds, which means it's short enough that you want to be casting your Void Eruptions and your Mindbenders at the exact same time. So if we go, here's your Void Eruptions, you cast one at, let's see, it's like 7 seconds. Yeah, and then you cast it like 1:30, 2:50, all that. So let's put in your Mindbender, and these seem to line up pretty appropriately, right? So if we look at your Void Eruptions, you get peaks right here. Actually, we can go to casts. There's a Void Eruption. So you cast one at 11.5 seconds, 1:34, 2:57, 4:15, and one at the very end at 5:35. And if we check your Mindbenders, these are basically the exact same. So this is good. This is a really good sign. You're lining up your Mindbenders with your Void forms on a fight that's short enough that you wouldn't get another Mindbender, right? So A+ right here. That's exactly what you're looking for. This is making your damage, spike around these moments where you're casting your Void form, so you can kind of see this is a Void form, obviously, this is a Void form, this is a Void form, this is a Void form, and this is the start of your last Void form, right? And then your in-betweens are when you don't have void form. And there's a spike right here because this is probably your next power infusion. And then there should be another similar spike right around here. Let's actually see in your casts timeline of power infusion. Actually, we don't want timeline. This works. Yeah, so you cast this one at your third power infusion at 4:14. Let's see. Void Eruption, is there one at 4:14? There is. Okay, so that's also good. Your fourth Void Eruption has a Mindbender and a Power Infusion with it, and you can see that right here in the damage. You spike around almost 15k DPS, which is really close to your 20k DPS spike from the beginning. So that's really good. And if we go to enemies, want Lady Enerva Darkvein, want resources to see your health. Your health is at, wow, I wish this would just give me a percentage. It's about a little under a fourth, right? So you should be in Twist of Fate execute mode right here, which is perfect. So if you had all your stuff like right here, where it's closer to 50%, I would save that last Void Eruption Power Infusion and Mindbender combo to where you get into Twist of Fate territory, which you did. So that's perfect. Very good. Although I'm guessing that if we were to look at your casts in that, we don't want enemies, we want friendlies. Ooh. Okay, I just clicked the wrong thing. Okay, Victorial. Casts, timelines. If we go to 4 minutes, what's 4 minutes and seconds? Like 240? We want 254. Okay, yeah, so this is where your next, this is that big Mindbender, Power Infusion, Void Form combo. We're going to look and see if your rotation is correct or if you're still doing that old Void Form rotation. So this is correct right here. You cast Void Eruption. Maybe you didn't have enough Insanity immediately to cast this Devouring Plague, but you did a Void Eruption and immediately a Void Bolt, so that's correct. And then after that, instead of casting this Devouring Plague, you should have cast Mind Blast and then Devouring Plague, right? You also reapply a Vampiric Touch during this huge damage window. That's a waste of a global. If you move this Vampiric Touch to where this Power Word Shield is, for instance, so you just bring it back to right before your giant combo, then you don't have to waste a global in the middle of all your damage to reapply this. So just move it back to like right here, so that you have a ton of time on your Vampiric Touch, so that you have enough time to just be doing your Void Bolts, your Mind Blasts, and your Devouring Plagues. So you go Void Bolt, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, Vampiric Touch. This should move here, this should move there, and this should move way back here. Probably don't need this Power Word Shield. But maybe. A lot of people will cast Power Word Shield because they're like, oh crap, I'm taking damage, so if I cast Power Word Shield, I'll take less. But it's not necessary, and it can hurt your damage big time. That's the thing we'll look at next. But it also is used for positioning, so maybe that's what this was, in which case it's forgivable, right? And especially because it's on prog. So yeah, so then let's continue. So Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt. This is what it should look like, right? So it should be Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt. Although you cast this one at 4:16 and this one at 4:21, so there's 5 seconds between there. I'm guessing that this Void Bolt was off cooldown when you cast this Devouring Plague, so these two should be swapped. You should be casting Void Bolt because the difference between these is 4:21 and 4:24. That's 3 seconds. This one's even shorter. So there shouldn't be this much time between your Void Bolts because you're playing Hungering Void, right? So you should be casting Hungering Void as much as, or Void Bolt as much as possible, right? So yeah, then the big thing that we can take away from this right here specifically is your rotation inside your giant Mindbender, Void Form, Power Infusion window is just a little wrong. So I just barely put out a video that goes through the single target rotation playing Shadow Flame Prism with Mindbender. So if you take a look at that, it'll say exactly what I've said here, which is Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. And apply your dots before you get into this so that you don't have to apply them during the window, right? And just by changing that on this one and on your very first opening rotation, that'll increase your damage decently, right? Then the other thing to look at would just be by the next Void form. Here it is. Okay, so this is a Mindbender Void form, which you saved, which is correct, right? Yeah, so your rotation again is wrong. So this is fine. So you cast Mindbender. This is correct actually, right here. Mindbender, Mind Blast, Void form. I don't know if your Shadow Word Death was up yet. So it looks like you cast it at 125. And Mind Blast, yeah, so it wouldn't be up by now. And actually, this Shadow Word Death shouldn't have been cast here. Oh, I guess it was cast on a manifestation, maybe for, yeah, you shouldn't have cast this here. So the thought was probably, oh, that thing's about to die, I'm going to hit it with Shadow Word Death. But you're better off saving this Shadow Word Death, not hitting it on that guy, and using it for this Mindbender on the boss, right? So if you save this, then you can put your first cast immediately after this Mindbender. Could be a Shadow Word Death, boom. Gives you the Shadow Flame Rift damage as well. And you get this Mind Blast immediately after. And then you're into Void form. And then this rotation again, it's just off a little bit. Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, right? So right here you do Void Bolt, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, Void Bolt. These Void Bolts are spaced pretty appropriately, I think. And then you get your Fey Guardians out, which I'm guessing it just came off cooldown, which is fine. You do want, this is a good cast, you want this during this Void form window. And then instead of this Devouring Plague, your Shadow Word Death was probably up at this point, even though you cast it right here. These could be swapped, so it's Shadow Word Death and then Devouring Plague, and even it should be Void Bolt, then Shadow Word Death, then Devouring Plague, and maybe even you're probably getting close to capping on Insanity right here, which is why you cast this Devouring Plague, but you're better off being capped on Insanity for half a second, or however long this is, to get your Mindbender extended and your Void form extended, and then cast just 2 Devouring Plagues back to back, boom boom, right? And then you're back into this rotation. So Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. So this was correct. This was incorrect. But I can only say that so many times. So yeah, so there's that. And then I guess the only other thing to look at would be a couple like simple prog things. We go back to tables. We go to mechanics. This will show how many potions. These are pre-pots, so how many potions everybody used during this fight. This fight was more than 5 minutes, so your number should be 2, but it's 1. Not a massive deal, but all of these people use 2, so you should also be using 2. It'll just, it'll help this last a little bit. And then health stones / tonics. Yours should be 2, right? So this is good, because you should use your health stone and you should use your health pot to stay alive during the fight. You're not in these slow deaths, but this slow deaths thing is also just a healer thing, so you don't care about it too much. Then the eye level requirement, you also don't care. The only thing to check here would be your raid's average item level. I try to make sure my item level is higher than this number at all times, so that I can say I'm pulling my weight as far as gear goes. If you're at like 216 and your raid's average item level is 222, then your gear is significantly holding back your raid team. So your raid team would be doing better if you had better gear. And you can say that some of that is just being unlucky, right? Oh, I haven't gotten good upgrades from my weekly vault or whatever. But with Valor and PvP and everything, uh, a lot of it comes down to just, are you putting in the time into the game to get your item level high enough to be, around where the rest of your team is, so that you're not holding everybody back. If you can be higher than this, then you can say you're doing more than you should, which is what you should be doing. Right? So if we go back to analyze, we can see, get rid of this, go to damage done. We can see that you're at 222, which is exactly at the average. This person's at 217. They should get better gear. These two people are below as well. They should get better gear. But you're at 222, so you're doing just fine. And then the last thing I want to look at real quick is in here, your Power Word Shield casts. So I mentioned this before. You could also look at, Health Stone 1, Spiritual Healing Potion 1. This is another good thing to see. Check, I should say. Fade is on like a 30-second cooldown, and you only used it once, even though it's a 6% damage reduction every time you use it. So you should be casting Fade more often, especially if you're soaking the bottles, or you're taking damage from the sins, or you're taking damage, the AoE damage from the things being drained or whatever. You should be casting Fade more often. Desperate Prayer, you only have one cast as well. You can cast that more often. That'll keep you alive as well. If you had cast Desperate Prayer and Fade as often as you could, then perhaps you wouldn't even need this Health Stone or this Spiritual Healing Potion, and you could have still been alive, right? One Arcane Torrent, this doesn't matter at all. Nobody really cares. I usually have one or two, so it gives you 15 Insanity, so that's the only reason. And then you have 2 Vampiric Embraces. This is good, kind of, because your job on this fight, you're a DPS player, right? So your job is to do as much damage as possible. And Vampiric Embrace is really nice because it takes your damage and directly translates it to healing, right? And it's 1 global to press this button. So it's good to have Vampiric Embrace, maybe you swap out 1 Mind Flay for a Vampiric Embrace, right? And then you're helping your team. But it doesn't do damage, so your damage will be 1 global lower, right? So that's not a huge deal, but it's worth, don't be. You have 2 casts, so you used it twice during the fight. So don't be replacing key damage abilities with a Vampiric Embrace. You can replace like a random Mind Flay that you're not gonna lose much, right? You soul shaped once. So it's good to see that you're at least using your mobility a little bit. And then you have 6 Power Word Shield casts. That's good. You want it pretty low. A lot of people will make up for their movement by using Power Word Shield a ton. So like 18 casts would be bad. Anything over like 10 I would consider is too much. So 6 is not bad. Because you should be planning your movement around your abilities. So you shouldn't be like casting a bunch and then being like, oh crap, I'm suddenly way far from where I need to be. Let me cast a Power Word Shield to get there. It should be, I know I need to be at this point in this much time, so I'm going to cast, move, cast, move, cast, move. Call it stutter stepping. And it looks like you did that just fine. So I think we could look at, the only other thing we could look at is your damage to like individual enemies, but I'm not too worried about that. Basically, you want to make sure you are hitting things other than just the boss. But yeah, that's basically it. All in all, I would say for a prog kill, this is about where I would expect you. And not just you specifically, but a Shadow Priest that's at the average raid item level on a fight that's pretty good for Shadow Priest, but not the best. I mean, the only people who beat you are people who have higher item level, and this one shaman, right? And you are doing, appropriate damage for your whole raid team. Like, you only lost by like 700 DPS, and you were better than the worst person by like, 1 point however K. But I'm sure some of these people died. But anyway, so yeah, that's how I look at a fight. the notes that I would put in your recruitment thread or whatever, if you were applying to my guild, would be uh, gear is good, rotation during void form is wrong, but just a little. Probably casts his defensive's not enough, but is good at using, uh, you know, potions at the right time, or using potions, using your health stones and your lock cookies. All of that's good. So you're gemmed, you're enchanted, minus that one gem if that's actually the case. So yeah, all in all, I'd say you're doing stuff correctly. There are just a few small things that you could do to do better. Okay, so that's the end of this video. Hopefully you guys learned something. I'll do another video shortly in the future where I go over how you can compare yourself to another Shadow Priest in the same fight. Because in this fight we only had the one Shadow Priest, so you can't really tell what you could have done, right, compared to somebody else who's in the exact same fight as you. So this is how you would look at yourself just on a regular old fight. You could also compare, you pull up a log of somebody else who is like similar fight length and similar item level, but did more damage than you, and you could look at the differences between you and them. But this is I don't have to do that because I know what you should be doing, right? So yeah, so that's what I would look at. Like I said, I'll do a video here shortly of a Shadow Priest who had 3 other Shadow Priests in his group. I can kind of talk about, how I look at their damage versus my damage, right? Because I've got another Shadow Priest in my group as well. So hopefully that'll be helpful as well. If you're not already in my Discord server, feel free to join. I'm in there all the time. You can talk to me about more in-depth questions, and I can, help you out or whatever. There's a link in the description. Also, if you enjoyed this video or I've earned your subscription, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Leave a comment, asking questions or whatever. Just do all the stuff that makes the YouTube algorithm happy. It helps me out. Yeah, so hopefully that helped, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.